Thank you, Nikita. Thank you for that introduction. Very good afternoon to everyone joining us here. I'm really thankful to each and every one of you for taking time off your schedules and being a part of this session. And it's a pleasure for me as well. So I just hope that this discussion, like Nitika has already mentioned, it's more of a discussion. We want it to be as interactive as possible. So I hope that by the end of this entire discussion, we'll have some key productive things to take away. And that's the whole motive of this session being organized, I guess.
Right, Supratim. So, Supratim, as you know, so there are, people are here who are getting to start their career into data science. So they will have many questions and concerns. What we want to hear from you first, your journey, maybe your, something about your educational background, then how was your first job like? And then from there, how you decided that you want to get into data science, what efforts you have taken, steps, maybe tell us, from there, and then in between, we will definitely keep asking you questions.
Yeah, sure. So I think to start off, I'll just give a very brief overview of how we've planned this entire discussion. So like Nitika has already mentioned, I've only spent 3.5 years in this industry, which in comparison to a lot of the audience joining in might be even lesser. So I'm not going to be discussing more towards the analytics industry or the set standards and practices being followed at this point of time. What we will be more or less looking at is my journey. And along this journey, a few key things that I think each and every one of us would face, and some few things which I think would help us in making decisions and progressing in this journey ahead. So if you see the phases, I've just put it up as 5 phases here. I'm very sure there's much more phases ahead. But for me, the way I see my journey so far, the past 4 years, it started from a very formative phase where it was more or less an idea of pursuing data science and having an interest in data science, wanting to explore the field. From there, I have progressed on to a phase where it was more or less preparing for that industry, picking up skills that I was lacking on, from which I then transformed to a role where I had to apply what I had learned to solve certain problems. And then it goes on to a point where you're trying to adapt. And based on what knowledge you've already gathered, you're trying to fit in solutions for different problems in the industry. So the road ahead, I'm pretty sure it goes on further beyond that. But as for now, that's something unknown. So just a few key points, I think, which I've already mentioned right now. So as we go through each of these phases, we'll be looking at what the circumstances were, where I was in my life at that point of time, from the career perspective, what problems I was working on. Problems here, I mean, just in context to the work I was doing, nothing other than that. A few skill sets which I had to acquire, and also a very important factor I feel which comes into play here is the existing skill set you have, and identifying that existing skill set and actually putting it to use as well. Because there are obviously going to be skills that you need to acquire, but you're also going to have certain skills which you have at your disposal by then. So how we can actually make use of that. Then we'll just briefly touch upon the solutions which we have designed, and even as a team, I've worked with some of these cases. There have been teamwork leading to the solutions. So we'll just briefly touch upon those. And on the way, whatever challenges we faced, and if there are some key takeaways, these would be things that I feel I did which helped, or in hindsight, I wish I did, and they would have helped. So this is just a very brief point on what things you could think of it as a do's and don'ts lists in a way. And the last but very important part of it, I think, is also going to be the motivation. What is actually driving you in your journey, and what it is that you want to be achieving, and how you can keep yourself in check as you progress through each and every one of these phases. So I'll just move on with a brief description of my education. I think Nitika already spoke about this. So like a lot of the people joining in here, I have a background in engineering, fortunately or unfortunately, and I specialized in biotechnology. And from there, I moved into a branch, which is, you could say, a little more math heavy. It requires more of biosciences and a combination of biostatistics as well. And they call this computational biology or bioinformatics. You'll have different terms thrown around regarding this. So my journey actually in the analytics industry started here, I would say, because this is the first time that I had to take up a challenge and I had to deliver a solution to a problem which was already being faced. And this required not only my domain knowledge, but also the application of something which was new to me, and that was data science. So this is where I actually found my first experience with data science. I'll just briefly go over what we were trying to do at that point of time, not taking too much time into this, because this is again going to be a complete, set of jargons thrown around otherwise. So I think a lot of the people in the audience might be aware of something called DNA labeling or DNA fingerprinting. This is something which is being used widely today. Even I think the more common or the more popularly known application would be the FBI using them for solving crimes, let's say. So they have their own tool which they use. And based on the DNA samples that they take, they're basically going to be using an instrument to generate some data. And from that data, they basically go into an interpretable report. So this interpretable report is what is finally being consumed. Now, as a part of this project, what we were trying to do was have our own open source tool, which can take this data in, which has been generated. The data I know doesn't look very familiar to a lot of people. Maybe it's not something that comes in a tabular manner. It's a series data. So analyze this and give them an interpretable report where they could find, insights and information that they actually require. So this was briefly the whole solution which we were working on. It took around a year's time for us to wrap this up and host this as an application. And this, you could say, is how I basically started off and found myself working on a problem which actually required data science skills.
Right. So, Supritam, what kind of analytical tools you were using during your, this instinct?
Right. So that actually brings me to the second part. So I've just put down a few things. When I look back and I find myself in that situation again, I think when someone came up to me and gave me this problem, there were a few things which strike to you right from the start. So one challenge immediately is understanding the data. Like I was saying, for some people here, this is not tabular. This is sequential data. The moment it's thrown to you in a huge volume, you are obviously going to be lost. So understanding the data, first of all, and being able to make sense of it is, I think, where we, any day in any project, will basically have to start with. And this is where what I was talking about earlier, the set of skills that you have already acquired by then. This is where I think this would come into play, or at least in my case here, that is what came into play. So my bioscience background was something which helped me understand the data. If I was working on another application here, this is where maybe your domain knowledge is basically going to come into picture and play a very vital role. The other skill which I had at my disposal at that point of time was being able to research, going through publications which have been coming up and trying to find out what are the most updated techniques and technologies being used out there. So this is also, I think, initially when all of us are starting a career in analytics and machine learning, this is a very important part of it, which I think even today, after 3 years, I'm still having to do researching and being updated about the most recent developments, upskilling continuously with respect to the requirements or the demands of the industry. So research here is something I would definitely like to highlight upon. The next phase, once you have started to understand the data and what you're working with, the next set of problems or challenges you would face would be in actually developing the solution. So this is where I think, Nitika, what you were talking about, tools being used and things like that actually come into the picture. So apart from tools, there is also going to be a very basic requirement, which is statistics. Now, for someone who is starting a career in analytics, I think this is first and foremost one of the most important factors, to have a firm knowledge of statistics. And that is something which for me at that point of time, because of the course that I was doing and the curriculum we were following, this was something which I had already at least explored and had a good knowledge on. So this was another skill which I had at my disposal at that point of time, which I put to use. The second point I have here is something maybe a little more vague, but nonetheless very important in my opinion, is logical reasoning. So in most of these problems which come up, uh, there is always some logic behind it which can be employed. And unless you have that logic behind it, it's going to be very difficult for you to convince a consumer or your client, let's say, that what you have done is actually making sense and they can go ahead and use this. So logical reasoning would play a very important part in the approach you take for your analysis, I would say, which is why I thought this is another thing which I would highlight here. And this would also, in my opinion, be a very important part for someone who is looking to start a career in data analysis. The third point here is where I had a skill which actually I needed to acquire. I didn't have a background in computer science or economics, and I didn't have experience working on programming tools as such. So this is where I found myself coming up against a barrier, you could say, where I needed to learn a new skill, and that was coding. So the choice for me was R at that point of time because most of the people in my research lab were working on R. So I started doing a course online. This was a course on Coursera itself by Johns Hopkins University, and I think it's a very widely followed course even today, 3 years later. So that's how I went ahead and then used my existing skill set to a certain extent. And also to answer your questions, could take up some new tools, some new skills which I thought I would need to go ahead and actually work and develop on the solution.
Right. So, Supritam, being from a non-IT background, how challenging it was for you to learn coding, and if you can share your experience, what all efforts you have put in to learn coding.
Right. So definitely when you start off, it's a difficult experience because you have to get used to syntax. And then if you're trying to learn two separate languages or two separate tools at the same time, it becomes even a little more difficult because each will have its own set of syntax to follow and functions and so on. So what I did was actually just focus on R initially, even though there were people who were suggesting me that you should start Python as well. But since it was something very new to me, I didn't really want to diversify at that point of time. I thought it's better to focus on one programming language, get the hang of it. And then once I'm at least confident that I can work on this, it would be a better idea to maybe move on to the next one. So here actually, Nitika, I think a lot of people here, like you were saying, who are from the non-IT background and want to be actually considering a career in analytics. For a lot of these people, I think there would be a few questions that would come to mind. In a way, I would call them mental barriers of sorts, which would maybe hinder you from making a very clear-cut decision or taking a step forward and actually deciding that is this something that I want to be doing. Now, I also found myself, very honestly, in this situation at that point of time. And the thing which actually drove me through this, I would say there were a few factors. The first thing I think was my interest in the field, which is first and foremost, I think something that everyone who is here can identify very easily. If you actually are interested in the field, do you like working with numbers? Do you like studying trends? Or does the thought of being able to predict something actually excite you a lot? So things like this will actually give you an idea if you have an interest for the field, or if even if you should develop an interest towards the field, in case you have been ignoring it so far. So the interest would be one key factor here. The second thing is, I think a lot of us would uh, go out there and in the process of trying to figure out what sort of courses to take up, what sort of analysis techniques to focus on, a lot of people would probably get lost and not find a direction which points very specifically to where they need to be. And that can be, I think, a little dangerous for a lot of people, and it can be a demotivating factor as well to a certain extent. So I think in those cases where it would be very good for you to actually keep a few institutes or a few courses in mind, which you already have had good reviews from others, or which have been, accepted by foreign universities and have been accredited by, say, different organizations, which would just give you a confidence that, okay, if I take up something like this, I feel the curriculum that I'm going to be following is actually something that will be helpful to me. So that is another part where I think you would have to go across a mental barrier and tell yourself that, okay, even though this seems like a very vast field, if I choose wisely, I will definitely go ahead to a certain point where I can make a decision easier.
Right.
And
Yeah, yeah. So, Supratim, one question here. You very well said that we should break out our mental barriers, but sometime alone we cannot do this. You need, some mentor or guide who can help you on this front. So, I would like to understand. Did you also have any such person, who played a role of mentor or guide to you, who pushed you that you should go ahead and, learn these new programming languages and motivated you? So,
To be honest, in my own experience, I didn't really have someone as a mentor who pushed me towards this.
okay.
But what actually interested me was the fact that I could realize that if I want to pursue a career in this field, I
Mm,
definitely do not have the knowledge or the skills that I require.
mm,
And that actually gave me a driving force in itself that, okay, this is something you need to be prepared for this field. So why not just go ahead and try and pick these things up and see how that goes. So it wasn't really an external force in my
mm,
case. It was more of an internal realization that I had. And I think for a lot of people, I think if they think about it,
mm.
it would be making sense in a way as well. When you
Sure.
already know that, yeah, you have an
Yeah,
interest, you want to pursue it, you definitely need some skills.
definitely, Supritam. So I must say that you are a highly motivated person.
I don't know about that, but yeah, this was at that point of time for sure. Yeah,
Right, right. Good to know. Yeah, please carry on.
right. So just the point that Nitika brought in right now, being motivated.
Mm,
So I definitely know that at that point of time, I was very motivated because I was just starting out my career, and it was a very crucial period of my life, a transitional phase in my life, you could say. So a few things that I think at that point of time, anyone and everyone who's joining the call today can do to keep yourself motivated without having to maybe rely on a mentor or an external source would be to actually put into use what you are learning. What I'm trying to say here is initially think about anything that you start to learn initially. At that point of time, you're not very confident about what you know about the subject at that point to go ahead and apply it. And unless you are doing that, you feel like what you have learned is actually not giving you any good returns. In a way, you're learning, but then you gain nothing out of it. So this feeling, I think, is something which can demotivate a few individuals, and it's very difficult for you to find, people who would at that point of time tell you that, okay, you're just starting a course in data analysis, but all right, I'll give you my data, you work on this, and you give me some solutions. So that situation is, I think, highly unlikely, which is why you have to create a few maybe projects for yourself. So I'll just give an example here from my own experience.
okay.
So, like I was saying, this is the time where I was just starting off my career, and I was just starting to get a paycheck at the end of every month.
Mm-hmm.
So, budgeting was something very new to me. I had to budget accordingly, and I wanted to, since I was already learning something like this, I wanted to see if I can apply it here because this is something personal. I am the end consumer. Even if I make some mistakes here, it's not going to be a big deal. So, what I basically started doing was just, keep a track of my expenses. So I would just follow something like what I'm showing up here on the slide, a
Mm-hmm.
very simple spreadsheet, I would just tabulate each day how much expenditure I have made on, say, different categories. I just put 3 here randomly. And then what I would try and do is get my tool or the R program or the R script that I had made to generate very simple plots. So when I see these plots, I have an overall idea of how my expenses have been going and if I need to curtail on any expenses. So this was just some utility I found for myself, just based on the knowledge that I was gaining at that point of time. And in this process, I think what also happened is that I started to look into things even more because now I had a solution in mind and I knew what I needed to get there, but I didn't know how to get there. So just in that process, I was exploring more. I was looking through more packages. I was looking through more functions, trying to see what is the best way to have this done in as little code as possible. So this was just something that I found for myself to keep myself motivated. And I think even if anyone else who's on the call here today would find something like this, where you actually see that what you are gaining in knowledge actually is translating to some benefits for you, it will just give you, I think, a little more motivation to pursue that and grow further. So I think this is one key takeaway that I would have here. Like I was saying before in the previous slide, my key takeaway here would be to just keep yourself motivated. And even though at certain points you feel that maybe, okay, what I'm learning, what use does it have? At those point of time, just know that it will have use. And if you want, you can definitely put it to use right then and there itself. And in fact, that would probably help you further.
That's a very well point you have mentioned, Supratim. I think it's a very nice idea that whatever you are learning, it is good to put in use, even at a small scale, but we should try doing it. So you created this using R, this visualization,
Right.
how, okay, right.
Right.
So I think
So
that's a good
yeah.
takeaway for all the members presented here who are doing real world data science master classes with us, that whatever they are getting to learn in these classes, they can try to put in use and get motivated. That's a very well point given, Supratim. So, Supritam, now that we got to know that during your this instinct, you got towards data science and analysis part of it, you already had a skill which was your domain knowledge and then your logical reasoning, and you knew that you have to acquire new skill, which is coding and more in-depth knowledge in data science and machine learning maybe. So then what was your next step? How did you find that uh, transformation that which can be a base support to help you to do this transformation?
So regarding that, like I was saying, I just went out. I looked into different courses which were available at that point of time,
Right.
mostly for free. And since that was the time that the analytics industry was starting to have this newfound boom of sorts, a lot of these courses had already started to come up. So that I think wasn't a major challenge. If anyone is looking for courses today, it's very easy. So you can just go Google for the tool that you want to pick up, and I'm pretty sure you'll have a list of at least 10 to 20 courses to choose from. But that is where I was pointing that knowing which one to finally go ahead with is sometimes a little difficult. But if you look through reviews and you look through feedback that people have provided after they've taken that course, I think you can make a more informed decision on that.
Right, right. Very well said, Supratim. So now we would like to hear more from your present career point of view, what you are doing and how it is going like. Some glimpse over that if you can share with us.
Yeah, sure. But before we move on to that, should we just have the audience put any questions they might have at this phase?
Oh, sure, sure. Why not? Why not?
Yeah.
So we are keeping the house open to have questions, guys. Kindly write your questions in chat box if you have any till this point of presentation. Supritam will be okay to answer you all. Please write down your questions in chat box. And if you have logged in through Facebook, then please put your questions in comment.
So while we're going through that, actually, this is one thing maybe I missed out while I was talking about this. Another good way of initially putting your new skills to use would be actually going through hackathons. So there are a lot of websites, let's say Kaggle, for instance, is one very well-known one.
Yes.
And there are more coming up now where they have competitions being organized. So I think when you're actually starting off, that is a good testing grounds of sorts for you to just go and see on a real world problem, how are you able to understand the problem and apply your knowledge and come up with a solution. So that is another thing I think would help you in a way put your newly acquired knowledge to good use and see that okay, it's actually yielding some benefit for you.
Right, right, Supratim. So Sai Vivek has a question. Sai Vivek, can you please write your question on comment so that we can read out to Supratim? Supratim, we have a question by Ishita. If you'll click on chat box, you will be able to see that.
Right, I can see it.
Yes.
Yeah, so thanks for that question, Ishita. It's actually a very valid point, and I think this is something we might have missed out on before. So, is it always necessary for you to have a science and technology background? Does anyone who work in the analytics industry always have a science and technology background? The answer to that is honestly no. Not everyone you find there has come from a science and a technology background. I myself have worked with people who are very skilled in analytics, I would say, in some specific domains, which I think we'll be discussing in some time. And they have a skill set which they've brought into the team in a way where they don't really need to be very thorough with, say, numbers or algorithms that need to be used, but they have certain skills which actually would still let them be a part of the team and contribute in a way where their skills are being put to use. And even says for someone who has done a BA and they've moved into the industry, just in a matter of say 1 year or 2 years time, if you're sticking to a team and if you're sticking to a function, you will have good domain knowledge about the function in itself. So that domain knowledge, like we were addressing before as well, helping you to understand the data is a very key, crucial part, which I think unless you start working and you actually start delivering solutions to clients, it is very difficult to understand. Even it was the same case for me as well. But that domain expertise for people who are not from a science background definitely builds up, and it's not like they can't, learn to work with Excel sheets, let's say, or even programming for that matter. So that background will not very honestly make a difference once you start working past the first 3 months. If you're, motivated and you feel that you're going to be working on picking up the skill set which you require for the role. So that background will not really be a very, big factor for you in making that decision. I hope that answers your question, Ishita.
Right. And adding to your point, Supratim, Ishita, we have even seen people from HR making their career into analytics. So they are doing well now in HR analytics, and people from management and commerce background have also, have become data scientists now. So I think background really doesn't matter, Supratim. It is your how much willpower or how much willingness you have to transform your career, and how much effort then you put into, design one for you. I think that's what really matters.
Definitely. I think, Ishita, if you ask any of your friends, even from, say, college, who've done a BTech and MTech, or just a BTech, have come from the science and technology background, once they actually start working for a company, I'm pretty sure they were as dumbfounded as anyone else who would be from, say, BA or BCom. because the skills that you suddenly need to work on are very different from the curriculum you followed. So that doesn't really, help science and technology students in a major way, other than the fact that maybe you have a better understanding of statistics already. But that's something you can definitely pick up even later on. Yeah. So I think a few other questions as well. Should we go through those?
Yes, yes, please.
So I see a question from Raman regarding how much time it took to go through the coding course. So Raman, I think that is again a very, it's based on your personal effort that you are willing to put in. There might be people who complete a month's course in just weeks time or even lesser. For me, as far as I can remember, it took me around, say, a month's time, because as I was learning, I was also trying to apply it to the solution which we were developing at that point of time, and I had research going on simultaneously. But I think, yeah, 1 month time is a good period of time to at least have some understanding of a programming language, and you'll be able to at least write down some code which you can execute and at least come up with some results. So a month's time, I think, would actually be a good baseline to follow. And if it's essential, yes, I would say in my experience, at least, it is essential. There are people who run analysis on Excel even, Microsoft Excel, although a lot of people might see it as, a very old-fashioned tool, it still finds application throughout the industry. And the only limitation you face there is when your data actually becomes huge. So once your data starts growing, it's very difficult for you to run analysis on Excel, which is why I think coding, especially at this stage, would definitely be a very good skill to have going into the analytics industry, because the volume of data has just kept growing, and I don't see it reducing. If not that it continues growing, I definitely don't see it reducing. So yes, from the scalability aspect, I think coding would be essential at this point, especially. Next, I see a question from Ishita again. So I'm an entrepreneur for a micro scale enterprise. Any intensive data science course? So Ishita, regarding that, I think we already touched upon this during the discussion previously. But if you go out there, just simply Google for courses, I think you'll be able to find a lot of courses. But what I would suggest in this case for you would be to actually have in mind what you're trying to work towards. If you already have a business set up, what exactly are you trying to achieve from running that analysis? I think will give you a better idea of what solution you need to be developing. So in your case, it might not be necessary for you to, for instance, go and take up a coding course if you're only trying to apply it to your own business and not go into the industry as such. So based on the problem you're trying to solve, I think you can narrow down on what sort of courses would be ideal for you. I hope that answers your question. I'm sorry if I can't pinpoint something right away. Going on to the next one, can I start attempting some DA problem? So I'm not very sure what you mean by a DA problem. Is that a data analytics problem?
I think so, yes.
Okay. So yeah, very honestly, like I was saying, a lot of people still use Excel to drive insights. You have good functionalities available for you to be able to pull up charts, to pull up filtered tables, pivot tables. So there are also modules which are available for running certain regression analysis, some variable importance analysis, things like that already available in Excel. So yes, definitely, if you have a good working experience in Excel, it definitely helps you work on data analytics projects easier. And the only limitation, like I mentioned to that, is the volume of the data that you can handle at that point of time.
Right.
And then we have a pharmacy student. Okay, so pharmacy is very close to where I came from. It's also based out of biosciences itself. So my simple answer to that is, if I have been able to make this transition, I think for you also it should be just as easy and simple if you want to make it.
Right. So Supritam, we have one question from our Facebook user also, Sai Vivek. He says that as a fresher, how we need to schedule our time as the course goes on. We have so many concepts to learn and how to land our first job. And
Okay,
further to
that's
it, yeah, what industry expects from a fresher.
all right. So Sai, I think most of the questions that you have at this point of time will be talking about in the upcoming segments. I guess Nitika will be going through things like that, right?
Right, yeah. So maybe towards the end of the presentation, in detail, we can answer your questions, I Vivek, but we will definitely do so. Kindly stay with us during the presentation and your question will be answered. One more question we have that how much is the use of coding in research work? So,
So
yeah.
for research, to be honest, it would be in comparison to, let's say, daily data scientists work. In comparison to that, yes, you would have lesser coding, because what you're also having to do simultaneously is go through 11 to 20 pages long manuscripts and trying to figure out how you're actually trying to fit in the solution to that. So the coding does take slightly a backseat in that case in research. But yes, I won't say that it's not important. It's equally important, but you will have certain other things also to focus on. Versus, let's say, a data scientist's day-to-day job, you would probably be coding much more extensively. Yeah.
Right. Sure. So, Supritam, I think we can move forward.
Okay. So I think this would bring me to something which is close to what Sai was asking about.
Mhm.
So just before we move on to that, I'd just like to briefly touch on some of these questions were also regarding this. So like you already know by now, I took this PGP course in Big Data Optimization and AI from Insofe itself. And this was the choice that I had made based on all the other courses that I found available. I thought I needed something which was more in depth, even if it meant that, I had to put, say, 6 months of time into this. So my training at Insote was actually the phase where I was preparing myself uh, and trying to acquire the skill set that I thought I was missing out on. And definitely, this would be a huge list of skills, which is why I haven't listed them down as such on the slide. But just to highlight on a few, I think you'll have a very firm understanding of statistics, which I already highlighted is very important. You'll also be exposed to different techniques which are being used for regression, classification, analysis on to keep it on a simpler level. And then you're also going to be working into more complex structures like say optimization problems and genetic algorithms and things like that, which at that point of time might seem a little, inapplicable in a way. But I can assure you that going ahead, the industry, the types of problems you will face, definitely can use those techniques and algorithms. So this is where I think a huge part of my skill set was acquired. And from there, I moved in to the analytics industry and I actually started working. So this brings me a little closer to the question that Sai was posing, that when you have so many things to do and you're already working and you have new things to learn, how do you cope up with that? Now, to answer that, I think, again, we go back to the motivation itself. So if you're personally motivated and you feel that this is something you genuinely have an interest for, I don't think putting in some extra time will feel like much of a burden. But yes, it will obviously strain you out, which is why maybe you can plan it in a way where you're covering a few aspects of the course or whatever content has been covered over the entire week, rather than having, rather than having it only for one day where you have to spend 3 to 4 hours just working on that course content and trying to understand and explore it further. So maybe divide it across the days so that you have little parts to re-explore and review. But that is something that I think based on your own schedule, you'll have to plan out. But I have definitely seen even people from my batch who were working. A lot of them were actually, majority of them, I would say, were already working at that point of time, and they definitely had even better attendance than I did. Although I was not really working at that point of time and I was full-fledged just doing this course. So I've seen people do it and manage that. So I'm definitely confident that if you're motivated and driven towards it, you'd definitely be able to do that. Which actually brings me to the next point, maybe, which is just starting your career. So let's say I have prepared myself, I've taken up the required skill set, which I feel I need for the industry, and I'm just starting to move in. Now, once you're in that phase, I think majority of us would actually face one new challenge, which is choosing a specialization. So when I moved from biotechnology to data science, I specialized initially in bioinformatics. So if you think of it as a funnel, it's getting narrower and narrower and narrower. So from biotechnology, I got to bioinformatics. That takes me a step closer to data science. From there, I actually went into data science. And now once I had some idea of the data science field and domain, there is some next layer to it where I have to narrow it down further for a job role. And in that, we can broadly look at four aspects here, which I'm pretty sure anyone and everyone who's joining the meeting today must be aware of. So the first part is descriptive analysis. This is something which is done on a wide, it's widely done across the industry for various clients, and almost every project that you will work in will require descriptive analysis to be done. For someone who actually wants to be focusing on this aspect, I think the job role that you will have would, at least, if not completely, majorly revolve around data visualization, which, mind you, is a very niche, you could say, skill to have, because not everyone is very skilled at presenting data and making it visible in a way where it's very easy to interpret. A lot of people might be working on that, but there are very few who are actually very skilled at that, which actually makes a big difference in my opinion. So data visualization here would bring you to developing, say, dashboards or even reports where you have a huge data which comes in, and you have someone who wants to make decisions very quick on the client's end, and they want some specific numbers, some KPIs, which they call it, or you could think of them as measures of their business, and they want those numbers very quick so that they can actually, go ahead and take some decisions on a very initial level before they start working on it in depth. So the descriptive analysis, definitely a very important part of any project or any problem we are working on. The next part is the diagnostic part, where you're looking at things that have happened and you're basically trying to say, what do you think are the possible factors driving it? So this brings you to another a little different job role, but here you would more or less be looking at trends of the data, see how the data actually varies over months, or how it varies across different distribution channels, or let's say different stores, things like that. So you're basically trying to make sense of the data and see how the data behaves in a way. And in this, a few of the things that we generally do would be correlation analysis, try to see if we can see high correlation between some factors which are actually driving the outcome. And then we'll go and focus on these particular drivers and see how their behavior changes. Another very, so actually when I talk about this, this is one technique which was actually introduced as a part of the curriculum in SOFE. And at that point of time, this was introduced as a solution majorly used in market basket analysis. So I think a lot of people might already be aware of it, but it's like if a person goes to a supermarket and based on their choice of goods that they are picking up, can you recommend what the next product that the same person will take up will be? So this association rule mining is used more or less, or even maybe introduced more or less in that aspect, but I've seen that it can be used very widely in terms of even diagnostic analysis, where you're trying to see what factors lead to what outcomes. So this is something I just want to touch on very briefly. I don't want to go into it in very detail, which brings me to the next subdomain or the specialization, which is the predictive analysis. Now, a lot of people today might be thinking that, predictive analysis is the new thing. It's the buzzword. Machine learning is all in all in this industry, and this is definitely where I need to be specializing. You don't even need to show me these 4 circles. I just know that I'm going to predictive.
Right.
So for people who have that sort of a mindset, sorry to spoil it for you, but at least from my experience, what I have seen is that even at this stage, companies are not very keen on going with predictive analysis to the point. As in, if you go and predict something for them, they will definitely use their own business understanding as a layer above that before the decision making comes in. But yes, it's definitely at a phase where you're more or less aiding a decision than taking a decision. In comparison, a lot of the work would lie on descriptive and diagnostic analysis, because this is something, the analytics industry is not something very new. Predictive methods might have been coming up more recently, and it's been a trend of late, but doesn't mean that the analytics industry previously didn't have anything. So they definitely were working on descriptive and diagnostic analysis, and that still has continued. And it still, to be honest, constitutes a majority of the chunk of analytics work that we are doing on a daily basis. The predictive part, yes, for me personally, is what I specialized in. I definitely find more interest in that, which is why I went into it. But it's not the all in all. It's in no way, you could say, the better specialization to choose. So based on your own skills, I think you'll be able to make a very good decision on which one to go forward. I'd just like to relate this to the question that Ishita brought up initially. So for someone who doesn't have a science and technology background, say descriptive analysis is something where they can still go and contribute equally, in my opinion, because it's more or less about presenting data and making it very easily interpretable just by viewing it. Now, that is a skill which science and technology is not going to be, helping you with. It's more of a creative idea, you could say. So in that case, I've seen a lot of people who are coming from, say, commerce background or a humanities background actually find very good roles in descriptive analysis itself, where they're maintaining and developing dashboards. So that is one factor that I just wanted to throw out there. The last part we have here is the prescriptive part of the analysis. Now, this is where you're going to your client with some results you have in hand, and you're telling them that, okay, this is what I have done, which is again where logical reasoning comes in. And what I have actually developed as a solution is logically correct. And it allies with all of the business understanding and the business practices that you're following. So you can go ahead and take these insights, take these recommendations or a proposal, let's say, where you could follow what we are suggesting. And then, you have your impact analysis coming in, where once you put the findings and the insights or the predictions in effect, what sort of performance do you see in your business? Is there a growth, or are the predictions actually driving down your sales, actually having a negative impact? So things like that will come into the prescriptive part, where you have evaluation and benefits to be analyzed. And you, like I said, you'll be monitoring. You'll be monitoring your model's performance and output. So that covers up in a way the initial first hurdle you would face, in my opinion, once you are just starting a career in analytics. The key takeaway here would be that explore these fields, see which actually suits you the best. And once you have identified that, okay, this field, this subfield or subdomain within analytics is my best fit, you specialize in that and you grow your skills focusing on that specific specialization itself. You obviously can go ahead and learn skills from all the different 3 spheres or 4 spheres here, but once you have identified which one you specialize in, I would say it's also a good idea to have some vertical development on that part, and you're focusing on it so that you have more skills in your toolkit for that specialization, at least in comparison to the others.
Right, Supritam. So, Supritam, in a way, can we say that industry today also heavily relies on descriptive and diagnostic analytics?
Yeah, majority of the project work that at least I have been doing has definitely been prescriptive and diagnostic. There might be a layer of a predictive solution which comes on top of that, but in almost all cases, you would generally definitely start with a descriptive and a diagnostic phase, even if you're moving towards a predictive model.
Okay, right. How about e-commerce industry? Because they are
So the
rapidly
e-commerce,
moving. Yeah.
yeah, even for the e-commerce industry, I think recommendation systems and things that they're developing on those lines would definitely be predictive. But even if you're trying to develop solutions like that, the initial parts where you are at least describing the data and diagnosing it still have to be implemented so that
Correct.
whatever predictive outcome you're coming up with will have to make sense. And these two earlier spheres are actually going to be helping you in that. So it's you could say all of them together work in combination for any solution as such to be developed.
So, one more question, Supritam. If a person is getting to start his, career in analytics, let's say a fresher only, or at a very entry level, 0 to 2 years or 3 years, if they want to start their career, so you suggest them to start with basic of it, which is descriptive analytics, and then move the ladder, or you see that basis their domain knowledge or expertise in industry, if they have of 2 years or 3 years, they can directly move on to diagnostic level also.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good point to bring out here. So I just want to clarify this in a way. I might have been confusing when I was trying to go through the stages. But if you think of it, all of them are at the same level. You will have basic understanding of descriptive, basic understanding of diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive maybe. But once you find an interest, from that basic understanding, you'll basically focus on one of these specializations and get skills so that from that basic, you move on to an intermediate and finally towards an expert level of understanding, at least for that specialization. So it's not like you have to cover up, let's say, intermediate stage and descriptive before you can move on to diagnostic. They're also independent in a way where you can be working on your own role without having to do the other part yourself. Because if you're working, let's say, in teams, you'll generally have people who have roles specified accordingly.
Correct. Yes. Got it.
Okay, so I think with that, we can just quickly look at a few key takeaways here as well. So I think I've already talked about this, how you want to be exploring the different spheres, the different subdomains, and then choosing a specialization. And then you go ahead and develop skills and learn tools which actually you need to be working with. So a few that I have noted down here: Qlik, Power BI, Tableau. These are all dashboarding tools majorly used in the descriptive context.
Right.
Then you have R, Python, and Azure Machine Learning is something which is also starting to be adopted recently. So these work more or less in the predictive domain. For diagnostic, we will also use R, Python. We use that for a diagnostic analysis as well, or even Excel for that matter. Prescriptive is more where you're storyboarding from the entire analysis, whatever results you've received, and you arrived at. You're just summarizing all of that in maybe a presentation. So the prescriptive end of it is more in terms of reports or decks being passed on. But these are a few tools I think right now, at least from what I see, are being used quite extensively. So maybe a few key tools to focus on once you have your specialization in mind.
Right. Sure. So, Supratim, I think we can directly move forward to our final segment and so sorry, and let's have questions all together towards the end of the session for the best interest of time, no?
Sure, sure, sure.
Now, yeah. So now we would, want to learn your role at Fractal Analytics, what kind of exciting projects you are part of, and what new learnings Fractal has offered you. So anything or everything which you can share with us from your current role, we would like to hear.
Sure. So, like I said, so far we've just covered the journey, the challenges, the motivating factors. Finally, if I have to give you an example of where all of that led, I think the solutions that I have developed so far would be a good example to show you how that knowledge acquired and all that, all that strain that you've gone through trying to acquire skills while having a job to take care of, all of that, where it ends up and what benefits you can reap out of it. So these are all, again, solutions which I have developed for clients in across various industries. And each of these are actually solutions which have been implemented as well. So when I'm showing you these solutions, please keep in mind that these are already being consumed in the market out there. The analytics industry is already delivering these sort of solutions, and their clients are already consuming and using them for their business. So just to go through a few key aspects here, one by one. The first analysis, or the type of analysis that I want to be focusing on, is forecasting. Now, forecasting here is a little different from the others, which is why I've kept this as a separate technique or a separate analysis in itself, let's say. Here, what you're trying to do is basically arrive at a number. So you can give a projection that, okay, your sales are going to be this much. The temperature tomorrow is going to be this much, or a stock price is going to fall by this much. So basically, the entire idea of the whole analysis is to come up with a number which is going to give me some information which helps me in my decision-making process. So a few applications that I have found so far in the work that I have done would be in inventory management. Let's say cases where I have stocks of some goods lying in my godowns, and I want to know what is the ideal number of stocks that I need to keep or maintain throughout, so that I meet the supply demands, which are supply and the demands which are out there. So inventory management is where you can tell them that, okay, next month you can expect to have, let's say, a requirement of 200 pieces of your product. And to do that, today, you at least need to have 200 products at your godown or wherever you're keeping your stock or managing your stock, so that you can supply once that demand comes in. So that is a very brief idea of inventory management. I can't really go into these in detail, so I'll just very briefly touch upon them. The second one we have here is workforce planning. This is where people are actually, so I can give you an example here. I think that will make it a little clearer. So this was a project that we were working for the biggest diagnostic services provider. Like we have Apollo here, a company in the US, who are the leaders in diagnostic services there. And what they wanted to do was forecast the number of lab samples that they will receive on a daily basis for at least, say, 1 month. So every month you're telling them, so let's say I'm in July now, and I give them predictions that in August, every day, you're going to have these many samples coming in. Now, based on that number, what they can do is go back and actually plan how many resources they need. So on a daily basis, how many people should be present to actually collect these samples, to go back and do the experiments, do the analysis in the labs, and then generate that report and then send that report out. So in that whole process, there are multiple people involved. And this is basically just the number of samples that you can expect actually helps them in planning for that. So this is one application for forecasting, which I've seen. The next two are price prediction and supply and demand management. I think I've already touched on this part in the previous example that I gave. But price prediction is something here, when we talk about it, it's more of a dynamic pricing. I think a lot of these e-commerce sites, I think a lot of us have also seen this. When you go on Make My Trip and you look for a flight to book, maybe just 5 minutes later, you see that the price of that flight has changed. Or even if you're on Flipkart and you're going through some product, you see that suddenly the price may vary. So this price prediction actually happens based on demands, the inventory which they have, and a lot of other factors which go behind that. So thinking of all these factors, we generally have models which will predict the ideal price that should be there for that product or that service at that point of time. And if we look at, if you have to look at the techniques that more or less get used here, overall, we'll more or less be working with regression techniques, which are parametric or even non-parametric. Let's not go into that in detail, although just to point out here, this is something that you can look into for people who have already maybe started doing a course. Since simple tweaks like this can actually give you a very, substantial change in results, a significant difference in the results that you come up with. So parametric and non-parametric are two different types of regression techniques which are used. And based on the solution that you're developing, you might want to choose either one. Then we go into time series analysis and artificial neural networks, which are again used very widely for the forecasting problems. The next type of analysis that we generally would run would be recommendations. Now, this is a very wide area, I would say, which is why a lot of things would fall into this bracket. This is where you're not actually giving a number, like let's say, what is the number of test samples which will come tomorrow? You're not really giving them a number, but you're giving them a recommendation that, okay, I would recommend that you have a certain response when you are receiving a certain mail from a customer and you have to generate a response to that. This is my recommendation, that this response would fit the query that the customer has come up with, or things like that. Even product recommendations for that matter, where a store, let's say, is already keeping some products on a daily basis. They maintain an inventory of a certain product. And whenever there is a marketing representative who comes there and sells that product, they always take it. Let's think of Surf, let's say. Surf is something which is always going to be stocked across stores. Now, what we might want to do is, once the company, let's say, who is selling Surf comes up with a new product and they want to know, okay, which are the stores where my marketing representatives should go first and focus on, so that these new stores who already keep Surf will be interested in this new detergent that we have come up with. So this is where you would have product recommendation systems come into play, where you study the stores and based on their purchase patterns and their characteristics, you will say, okay, for this product, this store is a good fit. So why don't you ask our marketing representative to go focus on this store so that you have higher chances at least of selling your product. The next thing we have here is lead identification. This is more or less in terms of finding prospective clients, where companies would be reaching out to a lot of clients, prospective clients, and trying to acquire businesses. So in that process, lead identification is something which helps them narrow down on which are the ideal clients or ideal targets for them. Anomaly detection and automated response systems, again, here, very similar. You're basically trying to look at anomalies, identify anomalies. And you're not trying to say that, okay, this number is an anomaly, but you look at an event and you say, okay, this event happening at this point of time in the month of August, in the second week of August, you don't expect to have such high sales or such low sales. So this is an anomaly. And then you're going to try and look at how you can, model that anomaly so that next time anything similar happens, you'll be able to determine beforehand that, okay, an anomaly might be coming up. So something anomalous is in the making, and you kind of take corrective steps on that. Automated response systems are, like I already touched upon it, I think, where let's say a customer has sent you a query. You're, let's say, Hotstar, and you release some new television series out there. And now customers are trying to give you feedback on it, or trying to ask you certain things about it, raising some complaints regarding access or things like that. And you don't want a customer service executive to be sitting there going through all of these mails and drafting, responses personally for each and every one of them. In these cases, automated response systems will come into picture where they have already been trained to identify what sort of a mail has come in and what would be a good response to that. So they'll give you a template of sorts, and then the customer service executive can just use that template, make a few changes, and just shoot that mail out. So the turnover time and things like that get drastically improved by this, which is why a lot of these companies are starting to adopt automated response systems more and more. The techniques which are mostly used for these sort of applications would be classification-based problems. Here again, a demarcation between probabilistic models and simple labeling models. So when I say probabilistic models, the automated response system, I think, is a good example for this. So let's say I receive a mail, and when I am a customer service executive, I get an output saying that this mail is a complaint. Now, for me to be very sure that what I have as a prediction is correct, I need to go through that entire body of the mail and then see, okay, yeah, this is actually a complaint or this is not a complaint. So that is adding some time for the person to have to go through that content, which is there as a part of that mail. Instead, if you make it something like a probabilistic model, where you say that there are 50% chances that this is a complaint, but there are also 25% chances that this is a query, or 10% chances that this is a feedback, and maybe 10% chances that it's a miscellaneous problem. Now, for a customer service executive, he gets a second layer of information, and that definitely will help him in trying to look for some keywords, maybe just eyeball through the content and quickly come to a resolution that, okay, yeah, I have highest chances, 50% chances that it is a complaint, only 10% chances that it is a feedback. And when I see overall, the mail generally looks like it's a complaint. So yeah, I forward this as a complaint. So that's a very simple example of where a probabilistic model would probably make more sense in answering or delivering the solution. To quickly wrap up, the final set of analysis we run would generally be optimization problems. Now I've kept this as a separate bracket in itself, mainly because the approach that you take for optimization problems is a little different from the others. Me, myself, I have worked on few projects in comparison to the forecasting and recommendation systems. In terms of optimization problems, I have worked on fewer of them. Also because they are, you could say, not utilized that much, or maybe their adoption in the industry hasn't really reached to a point where companies are very comfortable putting these into effect and trusting these solutions. So just to go over a few that I could find are driver analysis, route optimization, and portfolio management. Now, I'll just focus on the route optimization here so that I think it becomes a little clearer. So if you just think of Uber, let's say, the way that they're managing the cabs that they have, whenever there is a requirement, a customer comes up and says that I need a pickup, they're sending a certain cab there, and then that cab drives you down to your destination, and then it's again has to look for another pickup so that ultimately he has his own target for the day achieved. Now, if you think of it in that way, there is always going to be a very organized manner where you're assigning these cabs. In certain situations, you might have seen that there's a cab which is just 2 meters, maybe 2 minutes away, versus a cab which is 6 minutes away, but you're assigned to a cab which is actually further. Because maybe for that cab, once he drops you at the destination, the chance of getting a new pickup is higher. So it's optimized in a way where they're trying to maximize the number of trips that they make overall instead of individual trips. I don't know if this example was very clear, but like I said, these are a little more complex solutions, which find very niche applications in the industry. So if you're actually interested in them, you can reach out to me later maybe, and I can give you some resources which would help you go through these and understand them a little better. The techniques here, as you can also see, are the more feared ones, I would say. At least when I was doing the course in SOFE, these were things which seemed like more of rocket science in comparison to the others. So genetic algorithms, causality analysis, and Bayesian networks, these are all graphical techniques, more or less. Bayesian networks use something they call directed acyclic graphs, and graph theory comes into picture there. So these are a little more complex, but nonetheless, always good to know them so that you will find ways to apply them. So when these problems had actually come up to me, no one came and told me that, okay, use genetic algorithm for route optimization. It's just the fact that I was exposed to genetic algorithms and Bayesian networks during my curriculum, my training or my research that I did personally, which is why I could think that, okay, these techniques are there in my toolkit and I can actually apply it here to develop a solution. So it more or less works in that way, but also, right, whenever you're doing a forecasting, you can't really go ahead and use NLP for a forecasting problem. So this is more or less to give you an idea of what techniques get used for what type of applications, and also to show you that what you're learning when you're taking up these courses is definitely being put to use by companies, and they are definitely relying on analytics, on the analytics industry to give them some insights so that they can manage their businesses better, because it's a highly competitive market out there, and anything that gives you an advantage over your competitors is always more than welcome. So whatever you learn, be rest assured is going to be put into use. So that is the key takeaway from the final slide here. I think with that, we've more or less covered the entire session. Nitika, anything else we need to move on to?
Yeah, that's all, Supratim. I think now we can again open the house for questions. Guys, whatever questions you may have for Supratim, kindly write in chat box. So he has very, briefly but in a well-defined way has shared how he started and what all things he did when he was trying to transform his career into data science and what presently he is working. It's good to know that all the applications built by him are very much commercialized and they are well put in use in industry. That's very good to know, Supratim, and we wish you all the best for your future endeavors. Now we will have questions from audience. Kindly pour in whichever or whatever questions you can so that Supratim can answer. Meanwhile, Supratim, actually we missed answering one question which was from Abhijoy Datta. So he wants to know, just a sec, I'll just get this question. Yeah. So he wants to ensure that whether he can be a right fit for the program or not if he decides to get into data science, and would like to know how he can test that he has analytical bent of mind, which is very much needed, as you also pointed out in your first slide, to have logical reasoning. So he wants to know, is there any way to test it?
I think initially the best way to test it is to go register for some hackathons, because most of these hackathons will have very highly skilled individuals who are participating. So the benchmark is raised very high. And if you have an ability to reach even close to, let's say, the top 5 or top 10 solutions, you know for sure that you're doing something right. So I think that is a good way to test. Other than that, one other thing that I can suggest maybe is talk to your colleagues about any problem that they are facing, where you can think of a program that you can code. It could be something very simple as maybe a budgeting tool, like I showed you. And then trying to understand if you can, understand that requirement and bring it to a point where you know, okay, what data do I need for this? What sort of solution am I trying to work towards? And if you're a programmer, you're obviously well versed in the coding aspect, so you should be able to code that solution. But to understand if you have an analytical mindset as such, I think the previous process is more important, where you have a problem being brought up to you, and that should be able to give you an idea that, okay, what sort of data do I need to start with? What sort of techniques do I need to be working on for getting towards the solution? And also very importantly, what the solution is going to be. So if you can draw that picture in your mind, I think that should be good enough for you to go ahead and just sit with your system and then code it down.
Right. So I think, Supratim, what he wants to know is, even before taking up any course, he would want to know that whether he is a fit for that program or not. So I think that's his question is.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
So I think even before you're taking a course, even based on your education so far, I think the subjects you might have an interest towards will generally rely on, say, logical reasoning or analytics, things like that, at the core of it. So if you feel that you can take up these sort of subjects better, where analytics background is something which gets utilized more than the other skills, then yes, I think you can just take a leap of faith here. Also, I think that's an important part. When you're having all these questions, I think we were talking about this before as well, that am I a good fit? Now, the moment you tell yourself that you arrive at this decision where you're saying that, okay, I'm not a good fit, the journey stops there. It's the end. If you keep thinking, am I a good fit? You're also not going anywhere. You're kind of stuck in that same space. But if you take a move and you say that, okay, let's try, you at least get a better understanding of if you're a better fit or not. So instead of being stuck in that same zone, you'll at least progress ahead. Maybe at the end of it, you're not going to take up analysis or analytics as a profession at the end of it, but just trying it out will help you make a decision better. So you can yourself answer to get an answer to that question, that am I a better fit or a good fit in comparison.
right. Well said, Supratim. Yeah. Avishai says thanks. Right. Supratim, we have question from Raman in Zoom chat box, and then we have one more question from Sai Vivek from FB. So I think first we can answer to Raman, and then we'll move forward to Sai.
Yeah, sure. So, Raman, regarding the question about descriptive and the other subspecializations which I was talking about, them being mutually exclusive, I wouldn't really say they're completely mutually exclusive. Yes, for someone who's working on that, the role can be exclusive of the others, where you don't really have to sit with a data scientist who's going to be doing the modeling to be able to get the descriptive part done, or you don't really need to sit with the guy who's doing the dashboarding to get the modeling part done. But yes, you have to work uniformly, and you basically have a knowledge transfer happening, you could say, from each subspecialization towards the other, which is going to help you in your own work. But it's definitely not mutually exclusive completely as such. You'll definitely have a part where you're intersecting, but then at the same time, it's not going to be a case where you have to have all four people sitting in one room so that you can just develop the model, or you can just develop the dashboard, or just come up with the prescriptive insights. The second part to your question, if you have to specialize in the later areas and you don't really have a very good understanding of the previous ones, like I said, you will probably have people who are doing that part already. So in terms of knowing how to develop the dashboard, maybe you don't need to know how to do that very well. But what information from there is required for you to proceed with your part of the work, be it, say, the predictive model or the prescription that you are going to go out and give your clients or consumers. So that information transfer is something which I feel is very important, and that is where I think a lot of the success, revolving around a project will depend on how each of these subdomains interact and come up with the final solution. So I hope that answers your question.
Right. So Sai Vivek asks how to balance between the theory concepts and programming while pursuing the course.
Okay, so I think Insofia actually does it quite well for you without you having to do anything in the first place, because you have a theory section, at least the way it was designed for us. I don't know if it's still followed, but we always had a theory session during the first half of the day. followed by a session where we would actually sit and code solutions which are related to the theoretical concepts that we've just studied in the first half. So in that way, what happens is you already have an exposure towards what sort of problems you might face which require that techniques. When I was showing you this final slide, whenever I'm going through the techniques, I think whenever you'll be covering them up, you'll always be given some problem with respect to it, where you can use that technique and actually come up with a solution. So I think most of the good courses that you will find out there will actually do this for you in the first place itself. But let's say if you're doing it completely independently and you go out there, you're doing separate courses from separate different websites or say providers. In that case, you can just research more and find out, okay, when I'm doing, let's say, a significance test, a t-test, where is it used? So you can find problems like that. And you'll have a lot of data repositories out there which hold example data or template data that they call it. So you can just pull those template data out from there and just work on it yourself. Try to just experiment and see what you can get out of it. I think it's more or less an experimentation for, on your personal end, rather than a very defined course of action to take. At least that's the way I found it for myself. So I'm sorry if I can't give you a very, laid out course of action to take. That, okay, you take up your theoretical class, 2 hours you do this, and then the next 2 hours you do your coding, or the next day you do your coding. I think you'll have to figure out how that works best for you. But both of them are important, and there are definitely ways that you can connect both so that you have a better understanding.
So Pratham, we have another question by Vijay in
Right.
chat box.
Right. So my first placement, yes, I was placed through Insurface Career Service itself. So I think this was when already 3 companies or 2 or 3 companies are already come in by that time, and they had their first round of examinations, you could say, or selection tests. And then I joined Hinduja Global Solutions from there, and it was actually taken care of by the Insurface Career Services itself. But from Hinduja, my journey to Fractal was something where I had to make the transition myself, prepare personally. Didn't have any, help on that end.
Right. So, Supratim, I would really want to know how did you prepare yourself for fractal analytics? Because as we know that their interviews are very tough to crack, and yeah, we would like to hear from you, like what fractal expect from a candidate, skill-wise or technical knowledge-wise. How is their selection process like?
Right. So actually, Fractal is one company. Even before I joined, I was already following them beforehand, and I knew that they were already coming up with very good solutions. So one other thing I also knew was that their acceptance rate is very low. It was close to around 2% at that point of time when I was applying,
Right.
and that really scared me a lot, to be honest. So because I was scared, what also happened is I started preparing even better. So in comparison to, let's say, the level of preparation I had coming into the AGS interview, I definitely raised the bar on that. I prepared much better.
Right.
A few things that I can suggest would be intermediate knowledge already acquired from what I've seen. For a fresher, straight away to get through maybe the role that I went for would be difficult, because at that point of time, the test already will give you some questions and some problems to solve, which will require you to have a certain skill set already acquired. So definitely it becomes a little difficult for someone who's just finishing off a course and starting to, look out for the first job.
Right.
Nonetheless, it's definitely possible, because I do see freshers coming into the company in analytics consultant roles. So maybe just prepare better, where you know how to code solutions efficiently. You know which packages to be using, so that your code isn't very lengthy. It's not very heavy. And also logical reasoning and aptitude is something that they will definitely test as one of the rounds. So things like that, maybe prepare on those lines for some logical questions, multiple choice questions. And finally, I think when you're discussing, you have the face-to-face interviews and you're discussing problems with your interviewer, they will be looking at how you actually can scale up your solutions if you're already someone who has started working in the industry.
Right.
And they'll also try and see how well you fit into the role in a way where you can understand the business problem coming in and you can actually think of a solution. If not come up with a solution immediately, you have some way of thinking towards a solution. So they'll give you case studies where they'll say, maybe we have a client who's coming up with data like this. They have store data with these characteristics and they want to be seeing which are the best stores to focus on. So how would you go about that? So they'll more or less test your approach. So I think for that, being experienced with dealing with solutions and developing solutions will definitely be an added advantage. So hackathons and things like this will definitely help when you're trying
I
to
think it
tackle that
is.
part.
Yeah, I think it is with every organization, Supratim, that they would like to check approach of a candidate towards a business problem, not the solution, but how they approach and what is their analytical bend of mind to deal with the problem. So that's a good point,
Definitely.
and I really like that you were so focused and clear to get into this organization that you did your homework before you did your research, that you know what level of preparation is needed. So I think it is required from candidate side also to be clear, focused, and be ready with preparation if they really want to get into a good organization. So that's a good point.
Definitely, yeah. It's probably the most important factor. What
Correct.
you just said, I think is the most important factor. It has to be a personal drive for anyone.
Right, right. Right. So, quickly, maybe Supritam, you can answer these last two questions and then we will move towards wrapping up the session.
Right. So is the use of neural networks very prevalent? And what kind of expertise are companies now looking for in we learn at home using data science knowledge? Okay. So I think both of them I'll have to address separately. So firstly, regarding the question about neural networks, I think this is one part where even through the discussion we've had, I think some people might already have this idea, but for adoption actually to come in, where you're having these neural networks built and you have complex solutions which you've made, the adoption for them is something which is very important as well. Because to go out there and convince someone who is working on the business operations side of what you have done becomes more challenging as the solution becomes more complex. So for me to go to a business user and tell them that I've done a neural net, I've created a neural net with these many layers and this optimization running at the end of it with this cost function, it just confuses them. So they have limited understanding of what you've actually done, which I feel, this is just my personal opinion, which I feel actually, brings a concern to their mind where they don't really want to be adopting it and putting it into use. So neural networks, or they can be used definitely across the fields, especially I think would focus on the predictive part, but definitely you can still use them for diagnostic purposes as well. So the utility is there, but in practice, they are not being used as much as, say, more simpler tools, simply because of the reason that the business operations people will find it a little easier to understand if you go up to them with these sort of solutions. And neural nets will just, take it to a different conversation in itself. So I think that should answer your first question. So they are being used, but the adoption is where the issue lies. For the next question, sitting at home, I know of a few organizations which have web-based platforms where you can create your profile and you can work as a freelancer. But then again, I think a very important part here is your credibility. So let's say today, someone who has just completed a course goes up to some of these websites and creates a profile, and they're expecting that they're going to be given certain work and get paid for it. I'm assuming that you're doing this not as a pro bono thing, but you're doing this full time. So if you're expecting to get paid for it, I think you need some credibility on your end where you can say that, okay, I've already worked for these companies. I've already developed, or even if you haven't worked for any companies, I've developed these sort of solutions. You have some, say, blogs where you've described your solutions and you've written about them and, introduced people to them in detail. You can share those things, or you can even, let's say, share a link to your GitHub profile where you have all of these solutions already put up, so that someone who comes in can actually go through the work that you've already done and get some idea of what your caliber is, so that when they're coming in, they're confident that you'll be able to handle this, and whatever results you give to them, they will be able to use that. So I think that is an important part there. This is not something I think very easy to acquire. That credibility is going to only come over time. So yes, it's definitely an option which you can go for, but you cannot expect clients to be pouring in just when you're starting off. It might take some time.
Right, Supratim. I think if later any one of you would like to connect with Supratim, then you can find him on LinkedIn. Supratim, will that be fine with you if they connect with you later on, if they have any question?
Sure. I would be looking forward to that. More than happy to help anyone if you have any other questions. I know that we had limited time here, so maybe there are a few aspects which we didn't really get into in much detail. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions regarding those if you have.
Right. Many thanks to you, Supratim. You have taken out time for us and very patiently you have answered everyone's question. I'm sure they must have, find it good and benefited by it. Thank you so much again and everyone to be a part of this. And we will keep bringing these series for you guys going forward. So just try to attend these as much as you can. And once again, Supratim, thank you so much for your time with us.
Thank you for the opportunity. I had a really good time, and I just hope that the time that everyone here has taken out for the session today was in some way or the other useful for you, and it helps you in your journey ahead. So best of luck to everyone, and thank you so much for joining.
Definitely. Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.